Hey everybody, welcome to Dominion Cards, the video series where we take a strategic, in-depth look at various cards from the board game Dominion. Today we're looking at Familiar. This is a 3-coin and a potion cost action and attack card from Alchemy, and it says, +1 card, +1 action, each other player gains a curse. So Familiar is a pure chunking attack. It's pretty much all it does. It offers you no direct benefits. But as it is a cantrip, it doesn't harm you either. So cantrip is what we call a card that has +1 card and +1 action on it. This is a notable set of effects because it means the card just replaces itself in your hand. Right, it uses up no space, it doesn't cost you your action. Now, being a cantrip, this allows it to fit very easily into most decks. You do not need to buy like villages to support it or anything. You do not need extra draw. It's not a stock card. It's non-terminal, so it doesn't suffer from collisions with other terminal action cards. And once the curses run out, Familiar doesn't get in the way, and you can just play it to move past it, right? It becomes like this invisible card in your deck because it's a cantrip. Now, there's a major downside to Familiar, and that is that it has a potion in its cost. So a lot of the time, the potion isn't going to be doing anything else other than allow you to buy Familiar, right? Sometimes you just don't have other potion cards. Familiar is time limited in its usefulness. Don't really need any more when the curses are nearly gone. And this quickly makes the potion useless in your deck, getting in the way. But the thing is that a single potion in your deck is going to be better than having multiple curses. Right, if you're just buying this one stop card for a potion, would much rather have that than the entire curse pile in my deck. So with junking attacks, often one of the most effective counters is to first try and give most of the junk to your opponent first. Because when, for example, the curse pile empties, these cursing attacks, they stop working. There's no more curses to give out. So Familiar is usually a larger investment to add to your deck than other curses, but makes up for it by being friendlier to your own deck once you have it. So giving out curses is usually a very high priority thing to do. Curses have more impact if your opponent's deck is not under control yet. That's because they find it harder to draw past them and to trash them. Like, it's harder to connect them with your trash cards to get rid of them. So what this means is that it's fairly common to open potion. For Familiar, you are buying the potion on your 4, on your 4/3, so that you can start getting the Familiar straight away. However, Familiar costs 3 and potion, and there are odds of roughly about 25% that even if you open like Potion Silver, you're not going to be able to buy Familiar on turn 3 or 4, either because like the potion misses the shuffle, or you only reach like 2 and potion. But because Familiar is a high priority card, it's usually the correct play that you open potion anyway, and you just sort of hope that you're able to buy Familiar when you first draw that potion. And if you miss 3 in potion on turn 3 or 4, well, that kind of stinks for you, right? There's usually not much else you can do about it. And there's little in the way of a good backup plan because you only have like 2 coins to spend. Like, there's not necessarily going to be like University or something else that's nice in the kingdom. It's just, maybe you just don't get to buy anything at all. The entire turn is wasted and you didn't get a chance to buy Familiar. And that's really bad. The Familiar is actually one of the most hated cards. There was actually a recent attempt to do a community ranking based on enjoyment of cards rather than strength, and Familiar is right at the bottom, the bottommost card. People really do not like Familiar, and it's largely because of this unfortunate opening odds where basically you just get crushed if you miss Familiar, and because it has to happen so soon in the game, you just haven't had a chance to actually do anything about it yet. Okay, so how many Familiars do we want to add to our deck? So potion limits the number of Familiars you can buy each shuffle to just 1. It's very, very unlikely that you would buy multiple potions just for Familiar. And this is because you don't you don't need familiars that soon. Your deck's not under control by the time you would get around to buying another potion and actually getting another familiar without screwing up your deck too much, like all the curses have gone. So very, very rare. I say exceptionally unlikely. I've never seen someone buy multiple potions just for familiar. Like, it's never happened. But I try and word these things to leave in the possibility if it is possible. Anyway, if you buy a familiar each shuffle and none of your familiars nor your potion miss the shuffle, you're going to be giving out 1 curse on one shuffle, then you're going to be giving out 2, then you're going to give out 3, then you're going to give out 4, and then, of course, the curses are out, because that's all 10 of them. We're assuming here no, defense. And while we are thinking more in the realm of 2-player, bear in mind that no matter how many players you have, it is still 10 plays of a cursing attack, usually to give out all of the curses. So if both players are on an even footing, then a third familiar is not necessary. That means the shuffles will go 1 curse, 2 curse, and 2 curse, and then you've each given out 5, and that's it for all 10 curses. Right, at that point, the curses are empty, the familiars just aren't doing anything at all then, so why would you invest in the third familiar? But that doesn't mean that you never do it, so sometimes things miss shuffles. A player fails to reach 3 and potion when they draw their potion. And in these sorts of cases, you may want to invest in a third familiar to basically try and ensure that you win the curse split. So if you get a third familiar, that gives you the chance to get out that extra curse before your opponent, and then instead of the curse split going 5-5, one person gets 6, and the other only gets 4. Alternatively, if you are behind because your familiars missed the shuffle or your potion didn't show up till turn 5 or whatever, maybe you want an extra familiar just to try and catch up, possibly. Or there'd be much more likely not if you miss buying a familiar entirely, but if one of your familiars missed the shuffle and you haven't played familiar as often each shuffle. But bear in mind that the third familiar is a pretty big investment, given that it's only really going to do very little. It might not actually give out any curses at all. You might not get to play it until they run out. Or maybe it only gives you out, or it only dishes out 1 curse until they're all gone. Now, of course, if you do win the split, that means that you also receive 1 less curse, and that might actually be very important for you. But, the actual amount of cursing that it's going to be doing is very low, and then it just sort of stops doing anything in your deck. It's very rare to buy a 4th familiar. I've not really seen it. I guess maybe if there's Stonemason, where it's easy to gain multiple potion cards all at once. But usually, you don't spend all of these turns with potions going around buying do-nothing cantrips. Right, there are times when you do. I did a whole video on do-nothing cantrips, which is the Pearl Diver video in the Seaside series. So if you want to know a little bit more, you could watch that video. But otherwise, why would you buy familiar when the curse pile runs out? And there's not really much point a lot of the time. So given that you're only going to be buying 2 or maybe 3 familiars with your potion, you want to buy them as soon as possible, the potion is pretty short-lived. You're only going to have it for a certain amount of time. We're actually using it, and then it's just there in your deck and it's not really doing anything. Now, sometimes there are going to be other potion cost cards that you might want, and familiar gets a little bit better as a card in that case because the potion is actually still doing something for you, right? The potion is the main thing with familiar. You've got to stump up front for this potion, and it's nicer if it actually has a long-term use. You can keep using it after the familiars stop doing anything. Then that's good. And of course, cost-relevant trashers like Remodel, they make good use of the spare potion. They can trash it and turn it into something else, but also the familiars as well. Once the familiars are no longer doing anything, you do have these cards that cost 3 coins, and so stuff like Remodel can turn them into 5 cost cards, which can be quite nice. So, there is a potential use there that sometimes with familiar you do have other things that you can do with the potion or the familiars afterwards, and of course the card's going to be a lot better in those situations, so do watch out for these cost-relevant trashers. So in summary, familiar, it's actually a reasonably fast cursor. It scales up each shuffle very easily. So if you consider it to like a normal 5-cost junker, like, I don't know, Witch, you're not necessarily buying it that much sooner, but you are still doing a big upfront investment because you've got to get that potion that otherwise isn't building your deck, right? These cards are not... You're not improving your deck when you're buying potion and these familiars. You are simply buying them just to give out curses, and your deck is actually sort of slightly worse as a result. You could have been spending these turns buying villages and draw cards, but instead you were just buying potion and familiar instead. However, familiar is sort of... The reason why I call it a reasonably fast cursor is because you don't need to also invest in stuff like village support when you are buying them. So if you look at the case of Witch, you can buy a Witch each shuffle like you do with familiar, but you're also probably going to need to invest in things like villages as well. But at the end of it, when the curses run out, Witch is now still our draw card. It's not a great one, but it is still one. But familiar's not doing that for you. So familiar sort of benefits from decks that can get away with building a bit more slowly. This might mean things like slow trashing, so it was going to take a while to get under control anyway. Familiar's really good there. It punishes slow or no trashing because the curses are also very hard to deal with. But generally, if it was going to be slow to build your deck, that means that you've got time to let familiar do its thing and pump out all the curses and then catch up on building versus someone who is not going for familiar. If a deck is very fast and like building is very explosive very quickly, like there's something like stockpile cavalry or just like, the sort of things that let you build very, very quickly, familiar's slowdown might be too much. And of course, familiar has this very annoying chance of a catastrophic failure to be able to afford it early, often with little compensation, and there's usually not really much you can do about it. So if you were sort of wondering, I keep missing 3 and potion, is there anything better, different I should be doing? The answer is probably just no. Like, you just get unlucky, and it's very unfortunate. So that's it for familiar. So what we're going to do now is we're going to head over to the online client, going to generate some random kingdoms with familiar in it, and we're going to see what use it has in these kingdoms. Oops. Okay, so here our trashing is replace and trading post. So the trashing's not great. It's only really 1 card at a time. Trading post is still sort of only 1 card at a time because it gives you that silver stock card to your hand. We do have Bazaar and Throne Room for villages. We do have a Courtyard and Moat as draw. So there is an engine here. There's no plus buy, but there is like replace to gain extra cards. And there is actually a cheaper potion cost card with Vineyard, which is one where we want the potion late. So that's really good for familiar. We have got another use for the potion, and it is a deck where the building is very slow. There is a tax in the form of cut purse, and I guess technically like embargo as well. If someone tried to do Courtyard big money, you might be able to just open potion embargo and embargo the golds, and then they're in big trouble. They don't really want to go grab the golds. Now, eventually, of course, the curses will run out, but that means embargo's safe for you, because you are probably not buying gold early. You would rather get a trading post of bazaars and things like that. So I'm going to open... Maybe I do just open embargo and potion, right? It's fine to open the embargo. It's like a one-use silver, so it's kind of better than opening silver. It disappears. It's no longer a stop card, so I can play the familiars a little bit quicker. Now, there is Moat, which is an inconsistent defense. Do I want Moat here? I mean, maybe it's fine. Like because the trashing is slow and pretty rubbish, I'm looking to turn my junk into silvers and then maybe replace the silvers into bazaars and throne rooms. Yeah, I mean, given the only draw is Courtyard and Moat, like mixed with throne room, I think Moats are fine as well. If they stop me getting curses, that's good. And because there's this slightly inconsistent defense, maybe I do actually want to go for a third familiar, because maybe it will get blocked sometimes. Assuming, of course, I actually have time to, get some moats. Do I want cut purse? Probably. I'm certainly buying potion first, but I think the ability to hurt your opponent, like you're going to have coppers around for a long time, I think. So, because you're going to be prioritising trashing the curses with trading post. So, maybe I get one of them eventually. I don't think you're going to be screwed too much if your opponent chooses cut purse over buying potion. Now, if they hit your turn where you get potion, like, that's really bad. They're almost certainly going to stop you from hitting 3 potions. So I guess that's a question. Is cut purse really good against the potion opening to stop you hitting 3 potion? Well, I guess what are they going to get? They use the cut purse to get to Bazaar's trading post replace earlier on. I'm not... I was going to say I'm not convinced, but thinking about it, because you've got moat as well, I wonder if it's actually better to delay the potion, get a cut purse, try and work your way down to thinning first, and also get a moat. No, the moat can't be that good enough. But you could get lucky and stop a turn where they play 2 familiars and you block them both. But I was just wondering if it was better to work your way on thinning to hurt your opponent from buying familiar to slow them down. And because you've got the moat and you've got the trashing, which you want to get started on straight away. A genuinely tricky thought there. Either way, players are buying familiar. I wonder what you guys think. Would you be better off opening cut purse instead of potion, just because cut purse very specifically hurts your chance to hit 3 potion in the opening, and because of these? But familiar we are definitely using in this game. It's really important in this game. Its cursing ability basically stops anyone from doing anything else. And, there's another potion card, so it's all very nice for familiar there. That's a good familiar board. I see we got trading post again. This time we do have another alchemy card, but it's apprentice, so no other need for the potion. So those are the only 2 trashing cards. Apprentice is nice for trading post. You turn your junk into silvers and then you get to draw with the silvers. What else do we have? We have village for a village and technically diplomat, but it seems somewhat unlikely we will have a low hand size to trigger diplomat, so I guess it's just draw, but there's also patrol, which is much better draw. But, it works in a pinch. We have got lighthouse, however. So lighthouse is very effective defense. It seems not worth bothering to go for familiar because of a lighthouse. If you see your opponent open potion, just start buying lighthouses. As if you get, even before you have your deck under control, if you have 3 lighthouses or so, you're going to have really good coverage, and the familiars will be a complete waste of time. Similarly, there's also an attack in Swindler, but again, that's another reason to go for lighthouse. So I think familiar is completely skippable here because of lighthouse. It's possible to get a deck under control and draw it every turn with patrol and villages, and so you only actually need 2 lighthouses, and all the attacks don't work. So familiar and Swindler we are going to ignore completely. We're going to open lighthouse, and I don't know, silver seems better than navigator, and we are going to thin down with trading post and apprentice, and we're going to buy markets and villages and patrols, and we're just going to draw. And we have got buy with market. I don't know how much we build, given that these sorts of cards just aren't very good, and all we've really got is market and basic draw. Maybe we don't bother with apprentice. Maybe we just keep the silvers around and we just do market, patrol, village, and that helps build us up a little bit more quickly to double province. That sounds quite nice to me. There is lighthouse giving us a bit of money, so we'll have 10 from silvers, 2 from 2 lighthouses, 4 markets. That gets us to 16. So I think we're going to build up to double province with market, patrol, village, trading post, lighthouse. You need the lighthouses. And then these 4 cards, Diplomat, Swindler, Familiar, Navigator, and Apprentice, these 5 cards, we just ignore them. It's just not a board for them. So just a basic engine that builds up to double province, I think, is the way to go. It's if your opponent tries to not build the engine and just do patrol big money, then you go in on the familiars and you punish them for it. So both players are basically forced to build, and that means neither of you go for the attacks. So interesting, interplay with the strategies, but the correct thing to do is to build the engine, and then nobody bothers with the attacks, so it's useless there because of Lighthouse. Here we have Thinning with Ambassador and Lookout. We have Fishing Village as a village. We have Laboratory, Library and Tactician, all as draw. So there's a good engine here. Can we do double Tactician? Well, we've got Conspirator, so the answer is definitely yes, along with like Fishing Village. The only thing this deck is missing, I was going to say plus buy, but that's only from Tactician, so that's another reason to do a double Tactician deck. So you're going to ignore Library, but there is like Laboratory if you need it, but really we want a bunch of Conspirators. So we have got Ambassador and Lookout for Thinning, but Ambassador basically. I think we open Ambassador and Fishing Village, and because Ambassador is really good at getting rid of curses and throwing them back at our opponent, I think we don't bother with Familiar. Like, cursing attacks aren't very good in this deck. Tactician gives you a really big starting hand, and then it's very easy to like play your Conspirators. Maybe you have some Laboratories, and you can just find the Ambassador really easy and then just throw the curses back at them. So Familiar seems like a waste of time. You would much rather be Thinning with Ambassador as soon as possible, and that actively hurts your chance of hitting 3 potion to buy the Familiar. So, yeah, we just ignore Familiar. This is a bad board for it, because Ambassador's just too good at Thinning, and the curses are just no use. And because Familiar's doing nothing other than cursing, and cursing attacks are bad here, we just don't need to put in the investment. So, yeah, Familiar is ignored here, and we're doing a double Tactician deck. And we can't really play Merchant because we're doing double Tactician, because we can't play the silver. So we really want to be getting as many Conspirators as we can. And based on how many Conspirators and Fishing Villages we're able to get will depend on whether we can double Province or only do as good as like single Province and Duchy or whatever. Yep, so Familiar is skipped there. Here, what do we have? We have Steward for Thinning, and I guess replaces a Trasher as well. Steward, decent at getting rid of curses, it's just worth noting. What's our draw? It is Ghost Ship and a Caravan, but we do have a village, a Mining Village and Fishing Village, so it's easy to draw up with these cards, particularly Ghost Ship. There is no plus buy, but there is Artisan as a very good gainer that can like gain us ghost ships, and then we can buy like mining villages as well. I think so. Is Familiar worth it here? So we really want to open Steward and thin down very quickly. If Familiar is going to be worth it, it has to be because we think where the curses are going to be better for the to slow down the player who's going for the Steward. Now, again, there is Cut Purse to try and hurt our opponent from going 3 potion, but we would much rather be playing Steward here. I would far rather open with Steward and Caravan or Steward and Fishing Village. Maybe Caravan's a little bit better, makes it easier to find the Steward. We don't need the Fishing Village. I'm not so sure about Familiar here. So the problem is just that Steward trashes really well. If you go for Familiar, they can just get a second Steward. They can trash pretty quickly, and then, of course, when they're trashing quickly, Steward will then... they can play it for money. And in fact, I think if we see our opponent open potion, then we go for Fishing Village instead of Caravan, and we get a second Steward, and we use the Fishing Village to be able to like trash and get money with Steward on the same turns. And yeah, we can just get our deck under control very quickly because we've got like double Steward. Maybe we just open double Steward anyway, thinking about it. Maybe that's the real opening here regardless. For that reason, I just don't like Familiar. I think that the problem is that you are slowing down too much. 2 Stewards and Fishing Village makes it easy to get up towards like Ghost Ship, and then like buying more Fishing Villages, which is a nice cheap village, it gives us money, and soon the Familiar player is just going to be getting Ghost Shipped fairly often, and they're really going to struggle to build their deck at that point. Like the potion, the Familiars just slowed them down quite a lot. So I think we ignore Familiar. I think that the deck gets under control too quickly for Familiar to really be useful. and you're just not building, and building as quickly as you can is really important here. If your opponent ends up getting the Artisan as well, like they start to build very, very quickly, start to get a very good deck online, and the Familiar players slowed down too much. So I'm probably skipping Familiar here, and that means like skipping Potion entirely as well. Just fast trashing is the problem there for Familiar. And so here's the last kingdom. So we have Festival and Nobles as villages. So those are both stop card villages. And the draw is Ghost Ship, Laboratory, and Witch and Nobles. Those all only draw 2 cards. Nobles can draw 3. So we would really like to be using Festival as our village and draw with Nobles. Now there is Witch to give out curses. So that directly competes with Familiar. So the question is, which one's better? Well, what's interesting to note is that we have Lurker, and Lurker technically means we don't need a potion. We can just gain Familiars anyway. But I would probably much rather be getting Nobles with Lurkers, because that's a very expensive card, and we want to use it as our primary draw card. The big thing here is Remodel is the only trashing, which, of course, is just as good at giving out curses. I'm happy to run a deck that's trying to do like Festival and Witch early on. The Witch seems much better for our deck than the Familiar, honestly. So, and Lurker can pick up like both just as easily. But maybe we don't go for Lurker early. So how do we open here? I think we are skipping Familiar again, just because Witch is a better card. It is a card we would rather have in our deck when the curses run out. There is Remodel to do something with the Familiars when we're done, but you can always remodel the Witches into Nobles or whatever if you want to, right? So, do we open with Remodel? Let's say, what are we going to remodel Estates into? Secret Passage? Doesn't feel quite so good. Do we go for Lurker early? I don't think so. I think we open Silver and possibly Remodel. I think I'd do it anyway to get a start on the cursing. And I kind of just hope I get up to 5 and I can like buy a Festival. And eventually I will start remodeling Coppers into Lurkers. And I'm just going to try and buy my way up to the top. If I want to buy my way up to the top, maybe I'm better off opening double Silver. But I think I prefer Remodel. And Remodel can just turn Estates into Secret Passages early on. Just to get them out of the way. That seems reasonable. And then I start lurking Coppers into Lurkers. If my opponent gets a Lurker, then I will buy one just to respond, so they can't monopolise. But, Lurker's going to be a lot better once our deck is already under control. Really going to help us get Nobles and Laboratories and stuff like that. We do want to be playing Ghost Ship on our opponent. It's quite nasty here, because trashing is very slow, and the draw is not super great with the stop card villages. So we definitely want our Ghost Ship as well. So I think we skipped Familiar here too, just because Witch is better. So, what was that? Was that 2 kingdoms where we used Familiar out of those? So there were just things that were unfavourable to Familiar, like better Junkers. There was Lighthouse in one game. One game it was sort of too slow, the deck was too quick to get under control, it was not worth the opening investment. So Familiar's tricky, and of course there's always that really nasty opening chance for a miss that kind of really sucks for Familiar, so it's unpleasant. So I'm normally looking for a reason to not go for Familiar, if only because it's more enjoyable to not go for Familiar, if I'm going to be totally honest with you. But, when it's good, it's a very good cursing attack. It throws out curses pretty quickly, and, it's never going to be a dud card. It's not like Sea Hag, where the Sea Hag is useless once it's finished cursing, but, there is that potion that's probably useless. So, yeah, it's an okay card, Familiar. It's a cursing attack, so it's always going to be something you're going to consider whenever it shows up, at least. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope that was useful for you, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.